Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Monday Morning Tennis Rant. Before I talk about Sinner pulling out of the Shanghai Masters because of exhaustion and cramps, and Djokovic also struggling physically but making it through a couple of tough matches as we grown to get accustomed to from Djokovic. The guy just figures out how to win. It's quite impressive. I want to touch upon a couple of things that stood out to me in the last few days. And first and foremost, Amanda Anisimova, as I've been saying in many of my previous videos, has the best backhand on the WTA Tour. And I am going to dedicate an entire video to her backhand. It is quite different from some of the backhands that you see on the ATP Tour. I made a video a while back where I compared the classic two-handed backhand to the modern two-handed backhand to the next-gen two-handed backhand. And it's going to be interesting to see where her backhand falls in. But nevertheless, the backhand is absolutely incredible the way she can rip winners. She hits it very hard, and she has very good control over it. Now, it's not only the backhand, it's also her backhand return that I place as the best two-handed backhand return in the world. Of course, the best backhand return in general, because we don't have too many one-handed backhands on the WTA Tour. But also her forehand return is one of the best. I wouldn't go as far as placing it as the best forehand return in the world. But she is an incredibly dangerous player because not only does she play unbelievably aggressive from the baseline, she returns incredibly well. She also has a good serve. It has gotten a lot better over the last few years. So in the final of the WTA 1000 tournament in Beijing, she played possibly the best server on the WTA Tour right now, which is Linda Noskova. I am going to dedicate a video to the Noskova serve as well. She leads the WTA Tour in aces this year. But in the final against Anisimova, the percentage of points won on Noskova's first serve dropped to 61%. And that just goes to show you how difficult it is to serve when you're facing Anisimova. Now, this was the first big final for Noskova, and I do expect her to do big things on the WTA Tour. She not only has a great serve, but she also hits the ball very aggressive from the baseline, and consistency has been her biggest struggle. So it's going to be interesting to see how she plays off of this great result. Now, in the final, she came out a tad shaky. She lost the first set 6-0, but then found her game, won the second set. But ultimately, Anisimova was too strong for her, and she wins her second WTA 1000 title of the year. Now, since Anisimova has lost two Grand Slam finals, one against Swiatek at Wimbledon and one against Sabalenka at the US Open, she's gotten this label online as mentally weak. But I want to provide a stat to you that's going to prove the opposite. And Anisimova this year has won 13 out of 16 three-set matches. So she's actually quite tough mentally. I think those two finals, first of all, she played Swiatek and Sabalenka, the two best players in the world. And I've talked enough about the Wimbledon final and what happened there. And at the US Open final, she didn't find her best tennis, but you also have to acknowledge that she played incredibly tough opponents at that stage who have been there and done that. So I do expect Anisimova to not only take one Grand Slam title, but possibly multiple Grand Slam titles because her game is so unbelievably dangerous. There's not much that opponents can do when she's on. Now, let's transition to the Shanghai tournament. And another player that's on fire as of late is learner Tien. And as I discussed in my previous Monday morning rant, he's been a little bit under the radar. A lot of the attention has gone to Fonseca and Menchik, obviously because they had better results earlier in the year. Now, learner Tien, since the Beijing tournament, is playing a different level of tennis. Even though it's tough for anyone other than Sinner and Alcaraz to beat Djokovic at the Grand Slam level, I will say that I was disappointed to some degree with Tien's performance against Djokovic in the first round of the US Open from a technical and from a tactical standpoint. A very talented player, but like I said, a little bit under the radar compared to Fonseca and Menchik. But it's quite possible that he could actually end up as the best out of the young guys because he has a tremendous amount of talent. And in Beijing, he played the best tournament of his life, taking out Cerundolo, Cobolli, Musetti, and Medvedev before losing to Sinner in the final. And he's continuing to play well. Not quite as well as he did in Beijing, but he's coming through matches where he's lost the first set. For example, in his first match against Kecmanovic, lost the first set, came back to win. And then he was down a set and 3-love to Mute before beating him in 3 sets. So a spectacular player with the help of Michael Chang. Playing more aggressive in my opinion. He's hitting the ball a little bit bigger. He's got those incredible skills from the back of the court. To me, reminiscent of Marcelo Rios. So talent level through the roof. As a lefty, I wish that his serve would be more dangerous. I think that would give him better chances to play closer matches against Sinner and Alcaraz. I'm not saying that he would beat them, but he would definitely make life tougher for the big two if his serve was more dangerous. And I do think the serve has gotten better. So super excited what's happening with Linger, Tien. But let's get to the important subject of this video, and that's Djokovic and Sinner. On one hand, we have Djokovic, 38 years old, battling through in the match against Hanfmann. He had to throw up on the court. The conditions in Shanghai are absolutely brutal. The humidity is close to 90%, and the temperatures get close to 30 degrees Celsius. So these are conditions that are very difficult to handle. I've talked earlier this year when I posted some matches of me playing on my channel in the summer in Southeast Florida, where it's incredibly hot and humid. And we had many discussions on my channel that these type of conditions are quite frankly dangerous. And Djokovic, despite these difficult conditions, still managed to figure out a way how to win against Hanfmann, even though he lost the first set and was struggling. Absolutely spectacular performance. Djokovic often gets labeled as the guy who is faking things on the court and pretending to be tired, but the way this guy can recover physically in matches is something to behold. He did it at the US Open this year, struggling physically in the earlier rounds and then getting better physically as the tournament went on. And he can do that in a single match where he's struggling physically and is able to recover. The guy is one of the greatest athletes, not just in tennis, but in all sports. And he could possibly get his 41st Masters Series title. Can you believe this? Djokovic has won 40 Masters Series titles. Why? Because the guy that Djokovic has a very difficult time getting anywhere near beating since Davis Cup of 2023, and that's Jannik Sinner, who was struggling physically yesterday as well against Griekspoor. And before I talk about Sinner and my opinion on this situation, let me first give credit to Tien Griekspoor, who is a phenomenal player. I dedicated an entire video to his serve that you can check out. He has one of the best serves on tour. But since the clay court season this year, talking about the tournament in Sweden after Wimbledon that was on clay, that was the last time Griekspoor won a match. He lost 6 in a row. And this guy is so good, and yet he's having a hard time winning matches and is struggling with confidence. But happy to see him playing well again, because this is a player that has a tremendous amount of potential. Even though Sinner was struggling physically, even in his first match in Shanghai, he still put himself in a position to take this match into a third set, because Sinner was up 7-6, a very exhausting first set, and then had 4-3 love 40 on the Griekspoor serve. So that match could have been over right there, but Griekspoor held it together, extended this match to 3 sets, and got the victory from a withdrawal from Sinner. So all the credit goes to Griekspoor. But I do have to mention that the calendar on the ATP Tour and also on the WTA Tour is an absolute disaster. And there is a price to pay for this calendar. And unfortunately, I think even the top 2 guys are going to pay the price for this calendar. Because here's the thing. A lot of people are saying in various comment sections across social media that Jannik Sinner is not fit. They look at his physique and say that this guy needs to hit the gym or something. And you have to understand that this guy reached 4 consecutive Grand Slam finals. He was ranked number 1 in the world until the US Open this year. So you obviously can't achieve those results unless you are one of the best athletes, not only in tennis, but in all sports combined. So don't get it twisted. Jannik Sinner might look a certain way genetically, but this guy is incredibly fit. As I've discussed in many of my videos this year, humidity and a high temperature is very difficult to handle for all players, even the great Novak Djokovic or even Carlos Alcaraz, they are going to get affected by these conditions. But there are so many factors to consider regarding temperature, because you see players performing in Shanghai and they're fine, and you see so many other players withdrawing. So players are not equally affected by these conditions. Of course, other factors have to be considered. For example, how much did the player play in the previous week? How tough was the previous match? And so on. I'm sure there are some genetic variances as well, where some players handle hot conditions better than others. So fact is, Sinner played the final of an ATP 500 tournament on a Wednesday. That is absolutely ridiculous. I talked about this in my last Monday morning rant. Why are ATP finals taking place in the middle of the week? This has been happening all year long. And of course, one possible reason is that the smaller tournaments have to accommodate the Master Series tournaments, who have been extended to 2 weeks, which is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not going to talk about the 2-week Masters now. I've talked about this many times before. I'm not a big fan of it, and I think it does a lot of damage to the player. So Sinner plays a Wednesday final in which he performs really well. And then he goes right over to Shanghai and plays 2 consecutive matches in very difficult conditions, and his body breaks down, which is completely understandable. It can happen even to the best player in the world, who played a lot of matches this year despite not having played for a while between Australian Open and Rome. Many consecutive tournaments. He put in a lot of hard work, and I do think Jannik was working very hard after that US Open loss. So all this possibly accumulated, and Jannik kind of hit a wall, physically speaking. Now, for you guys that are saying Jannik cannot handle hot conditions, so even though I've heard that the conditions this year in Shanghai are a little bit tougher than last year, Jannik won Shanghai last year. Now, of course, the tour has been overshadowed with the Federer comments about courts being purposefully slowed down to have Sinner and Alcaraz finals. And I've talked about this a couple of times in my latest Monday morning tennis rant. I said that Federer was possibly taking a little bit out of context because he didn't specify a time frame in which the courts had been slowed down. You can check out my latest Monday morning tennis rant. I talk about my viewpoint on the slowdown of the tour, which happened in 2001 and not recently. And if you look at the data, the vast majority of hard courts are medium fast, and there are still discrepancies in the court speeds. Now, interestingly, the Shanghai tournament reduced the court speed by a lot. So not only is it humid and hot, but the court is also playing extremely slow this year compared to pretty quick court last year. So these rallies are extended. Of course, in my Monday morning rant, I talked about the balls being of a lower quality. These guys have to hit more balls than usual to put the ball away, and a lot of players are struggling. Now, one more thing about the Federer comment, and I wish he didn't bring up the name Sinner and Alcaraz, because now players are being asked of this, and Zverev made a comment. And in my opinion, a fast court doesn't benefit anyone more than Jannik Sinner. Jannik Sinner is the best fast court player on the ATP Tour. Nobody comes even close. So that's where the argument falls apart. Of course, on a faster court, you have maybe more chances to beat Alcaraz. We have to see, because there's the old Alcaraz and there's the new Alcaraz who makes a final every time he plays a tournament. So let's see how Alcaraz does on a fast indoor court. But generally speaking, Alcaraz is more beatable, possibly, on a very fast indoor hard court. We have to see. But in Sinner's case, are you kidding me? The guy is absolutely the best fast court player in the world. So this whole thing about the courts being slowed down makes absolutely no sense, because Sinner and Alcaraz are the best players in the world on any surface. One of these two guys has made a Grand Slam final in the last 8 Grand Slam tournaments. So it doesn't matter what surface you put these guys on. When they are at the top of their game, they're going to make the final regardless.